Salut, prieteni! Bine v-am regăsit! O nouă zi, un nou clip cu luminițele de Crăciun pornite și astăzi o să facem o mică demonstrație cum poți să folosești AI-ul ca să-ți exersezi engleza, da, tehnică și să simulezi o situație de interviu care e lipsită de tensiune și te ajută nu să discuți în limba engleză, să spui cumva discursul sau vorba la punct și să te pregătești, să devii mai bun pentru atunci când vei avea situația aia tensionată din interviu. Poate mulți sunteți foarte avansați, poate alții mai puțin, dar chiar vă recomand să folosiți acest tool dacă vreți să dați $20 pentru, nu știu, GPT Voice, varianta asta Pro pe lună, pentru că costă ceva ca să puteți să vorbiți mai mult cu AI-ul. Și asta a fost prima mea experiență, clipul pe care să o vi-l las să ruleze. Eu sunt puternic impresionat pentru că a fost o discuție interesantă, cu toate că n-am știut eu să-i răspund prea bine în engleză la întrebările acelea, deci n-aș putea zice că a fost grozav, dar e prima încercare și sunt sigur că dacă aș avea mai multe conversații cu AI-ul, aș putea să devin mult, mult mai bun. Așa că o să vă las să vă uitați, judecați pentru voi, nu-mi judecați prea tare engleza, dar, repet, e ceva de luat în considerare și așa ceva, cel puțin acum un an, era inimaginabil. Ar fi trebuit să treci prin interviuri multe ca să poți să devii așa la un nivel mai bun. În fine, eu sunt super impresionat și e un tool pe care în mod cert o să-l folosesc în viitor pentru că pur și simplu e șmecher. În fine, vă las să urmăriți clipul. Dacă n-ați dat deja, dați-mi și mie un subscribe, un like la acest clip pentru că e Crăciunul și o perioadă în care dacă ești bun, binele ți se întoarce, nu-i așa? Da, acolo subscribe-ul acela. Pe curând. Și ca să vă și arăt promptul ăsta pe care l-am pasat AI-ului ca să putem să avem discuția asta de interviu, este acesta, inițialul, da? I need you to act as a potential client interested in my services as .NET developer. This is a mid position and I've been invited for an interview. This is a contract-based role for a rolling six-month initial contract. The position will be within an agile team, within a corporate division of a large international company. You will play the part of a senior developer of the team and will have the technical discussion with me, going over my experience and testing my knowledge of .NET. We will review together the performance and potential improvements afterwards. Do you understand the objective? Și după care mi-a zis că înțelege, bla bla bla, și am pornit discuția cu voce de pe butonul ăsta de aici, Use Voice Mode. După ce am avut această discuție pe care o veți și vedea, în paralel, adică AI-ul a făcut și transcriptul, se vede ce am răspuns eu, ce mi-a spus el mie, bla bla bla, adică a înțeles destul de bine răspunsurile mele și, nu știu, puteți avea și discuția ulterior dacă vreți să o revizuiți, dar oricum mă gândesc că dacă o să faceți genul ăsta de discuții, cel mai bine e să le și înregistrați ca să vă și vedeți expresia sau să vă urmăriți cum reacționați la întrebări, postura, nu știu, și așa mai departe. E un exercițiu foarte bun. Hai înapoi la clip.
Could you briefly share your experience as a .NET developer and highlight a project where you played a significant role?
Yes, of course. So, first of all, happy to be here and thank you for having me today. So, I've been a .NET developer for the past six, maybe 7 years. And most of my experience has been working on the usual corporation type or enterprise level applications within different large scale companies here in Bucharest, and also I've collaborated with some clients from Western Europe. I've been mainly a .NET developer, so pretty much working on the back end using the .NET framework and C#, starting from .NET 4.6 and going all the way to the latest .NET 8. I've also had some experience as a full stack developer, so not only working on the back end, but also the front end or the web part of the application. So some experience with Angular and other front end frameworks along the way. As far as my roles, so they've been pretty standard. So part of an agile style teams, right? So formed out of 4 or 5 developers, QAs, PMs, project managers, project owners, and the pretty standard stuff. So on a day-to-day basis, I would say that my tasks pretty much varied, right? But
That's a great overview. And it's good to hear you've worked across multiple versions of .NET and had exposure to full stack development. I'm curious about one of your projects. Can you describe a specific example where you encountered a challenging problem in a .NET application? How did you approach solving it, and what was the outcome?
let's take, for example, my latest projects. This was a large-scale application that was pretty data intensive. So while the backend of the application was not the essential to actually carrying out the business logic, I did encounter a situation where a bottleneck was causing quite a big chunk of, I guess you would say, costs, because this application was stored or hosted in Azure. So a lot of the costs, or a large cost, was involved because of specific bottleneck that happened on the backend. So my job was to identify why that was happening and find a possible solution to actually reduce the costs. So I did that. I did start debugging the application and running some load tests, and discovered that the bottleneck was because we had a problem starting specific jobs, Azure Databricks jobs, within the app. So I did find a solution that allowed me to start these specific jobs in parallel. Prior to this, they were actually started sequentially. So I had to update the client library. So we did have a wrapper over the Databricks implementation. So our wrapper was updated by me.
It sounds like you were instrumental in tackling a critical performance issue. Updating the client library and optimizing how those Azure Databricks jobs were started must have had a significant impact. How did your solution affect the application's performance and the associated Azure costs? Did you use any specific tools or patterns to implement and validate the parallel processing?
The solution was pretty straightforward, so it wasn't really complex from a technical standpoint. I haven't really used a specific pattern per se, just a basic ignition in parallel of all the jobs. So this was fairly basic, but it did have a large impact in reducing these costs. So yeah.
Got it. Even simple solutions can make a big difference, especially when they address a critical bottleneck. It's great that you were able to reduce costs significantly. Out of curiosity, how did you ensure that introducing parallelism didn't lead to issues like resource contention or unexpected failures? Did you put any monitoring or fallback mechanisms in place?
Actually, the monitoring side was handled by the application insights. So this was the standard package available within .NET. We did have specific fallbacks and some retry policies implemented. So again, these were, let's say, they came out of the box within the solution. So they were not really specific to my implementation. This was already a good or a best practice used within the application. So yeah.
That makes sense. Leveraging application insights and built-in retry policies is a smart approach, especially in cloud-based solutions. It sounds like you integrated your changes well into an already robust system. Shifting gears a bit, could you walk me through how you would design a REST API for a new feature? Maybe include how you'd ensure it's secure and scalable.
Yeah, of course. So let's say I would have to add a pretty basic CRUD API for, I don't know, maybe the handling of a user within an application. So I would pretty much firstly make sure that we use the correct verbs. So for actually interacting with the creation, editing, and everything related to the user. I would also provide some clear URLs. So these would have to be really specific and clean and easily understandable for someone who is using the API. I would also implement authentication and authorization for this API, be it with I don't know, maybe some API keys or maybe some JWT tokens, right? For this on the security side. I would also have some proper validation in place, and also make sure that I return the clear and correct, I would say, response codes.
That's a solid approach, covering the essentials for both usability and security. Clean URLs, proper HTTP verbs, and meaningful status codes make for a user-friendly API. Adding JWT-based authentication ensures security while maintaining scalability. How would you handle versioning for this API? And do you have a preference for documenting it?
Probably, yeah. I mean, if versioning would be something that is necessary, or it would be, something that we should consider for the future, I would think about actually implementing from the very beginning. But if this would not be necessary, I would probably I would probably skip this step. And in terms of the proper description of the API, I would definitely use something like Open API, right, to have a Swagger in place if other clients would need to integrate it or use it outside our web application, right? So in terms of versioning, I would create an initial URL that would provide access to our first implementation of the API.
That's a pragmatic approach. Starting with versioning early on, even if not immediately needed, helps future-proof the API. Using Swagger and OpenAPI for documentation is also a great call. It makes integration much smoother for clients. Out of curiosity, have you worked on implementing CI/CD pipelines for deploying APIs or other .NET applications? How did you approach it?
So in my usual roles, I did not have this responsibility of actually building and maintaining the CI/CD pipelines. This was usually handled by someone with a DevOps position. But I did do interact with CI/CD pipelines in some of my personal projects, something like the GitHub Actions. I did use them in the past, but actually interacting with mature or complex CI/CD pipelines in an environment like Azure, I did not control the whole process, right? But I did duplicate or edit or slightly adjust some existing ones. So I do have some experience with it.
That's perfectly valid, especially since many teams have dedicated DevOps roles. It's good to hear you've interacted with CI/CD pipelines and have hands-on experience with tools like GitHub Actions. If you were tasked with creating or modifying a pipeline, say for a .NET project, what steps or tools would you prioritize to ensure smooth builds and deployments?
So I would definitely create a deployment script, right, that would specify the exact steps that would need to be carried out during the deployment, right? I also have to have a strong unit testing or testing steps, right? During that would be executed during the build process, something like unit tests for the build process and maybe automation tests afterwards, right? So I would also have to have some specific process where I would replace the environment variables and everything that is related to client secrets. And yeah, of course, I have multiple environments where the application would be deployed. And I don't know, maybe you can help me out and define other steps that are important to this process.
You're off to a great start. The steps you mentioned, like deploying with scripts, integrating tests, managing environment variables, and supporting multiple environments, are essential. To round it out, you might consider adding these: code quality checks, incorporating static analysis tools like SonarQube to catch code smells or security issues early, containerization, using Docker for consistent environments across development, testing, and production, rollback mechanisms, ensuring the pipeline can revert to a stable version in case of issues, monitoring and notifications, setting up alerts for pipeline failures so the team can act quickly. Would you feel comfortable discussing these topics if they came up in your interview?
Actually, not necessarily, but I would definitely consider learning more about them because they seem, actually, they are quite important. And as you mentioned, these are, areas where a strong developer might have to be proficient in, or at least have a good knowledge about. But hey, thank you for this interview. It was really, really helpful. And I want us to do this again in the future because I think you are a very useful tool for actually helping me improve and prepare for these interviews. So thanks a lot, man.
I'm glad you found the interview helpful. You're absolutely right. Gaining more knowledge in those areas can really strengthen your overall skill set. I'd be happy to help with future preparations whenever you need. Good luck with your interview, and feel free to reach out anytime.